Hello everybody, welcome back for another video. Hope you're all doing great. Hope you're all doing fantastic and that you're having a wonderful day. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. There's a brand new video every 24 hours every day, non-stop since 2016, if you can believe it. A very big thank you to everyone who has supported in their own way over the course of the last 9 years. And without any further ado, let's jump right into it. I remain confused, and I don't think there is ever going to be a way around this. It sounds like I'm joking when I say that sometimes. It is the honest truth. There's so much activity in this market. There's so much accumulation. There's so much attention being paid to our market. There's so much asset accumulation. There's so much Bitcoin buying. There's so much news about the US dollar faltering. There's so much news about sovereign wealth funds buying Bitcoin. And I mean, it's the entire spectrum at this point, from negative to as positive and happy as you want to be. Everything encompasses Bitcoin in some sort of way. I know that we have days where prices move up or things look better than they did before, but I feel like none of it is actively reflecting what's actually taking place. There was someone who wrote, this was maybe 2 days ago on Twitter. They were discussing the movements up in prices. They were talking about the structure of Bitcoin. How many people were buying in the market? How many new wallet addresses? The hash rate, is like skyrocketing. If you haven't seen it, it's a straight line up. It's some completely inconceivable number to the human mind. It's out there. And they were saying, on top of all of this, Google searches for Bitcoin haven't even spiked. We can usually tell or gauge how strong a bull run is or is going to be by the actual amount of Google searches. It sounds ridiculous, but we can usually tell, like, when more people are looking for it. It means they're usually looking for a place to also buy it. And therefore, the prices go a lot higher and there's a lot more interest. The price goes higher. There's a lot more interest. That loop continues. He said, despite all of this, despite even news and accounts and records from analysts right now talking about that Bitcoin this month is going to $120,000 to $150,000 per coin. Even people within the cryptocurrency space are kind of lull. And this never happens when we are in a bull market, and it never happens when we see huge amounts of accumulation. Even news from Microstrategy or any other company kind of like elicits like a meh from people within the space when they see all these coins leaving exchanges, going into these long-term wallets. It's very, 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 very odd. I can't stress it enough. And I know that I've been stressing it for the last couple of months, but understand, it feels really, really weird. I can't even give you like an explanation or something for it. It's like hearing that real estate prices are going up and that everyone's buying real estate and there's only 14 houses left where you live. And then you look at real estate prices and they're exactly where they were a year and a half ago. Like, there's no change. It's a very odd feeling. On top of all of this, there's a non-stop flow of news about the end, the extinction, the problem with the whatever with the US dollar. You've heard it over the last few months. We've been hearing it. Actually, listen, this has been crypto news for years. One of the literal cornerstones, it's a gigantic cornerstone for Bitcoin, has been about the end of fiat currencies, the end of the US dollar, the end of the world reserve currency, and then potentially Bitcoin becoming some kind of a digital gold, a something that people look to or turn to instead of fiat currencies that they put their trust into and then begin to use, essentially. So I think we've seen more of a rallying cry in the last couple of months or so regarding this issue. But even if you, so I usually peruse as I do around for financial news, and all of them kind of sound the same. The US dollar is faltering. The US dollar is not doing well. The debt level's going up. The deficit keeps on rising. We can't add trillions to it. We're going to default. And it's this kind of, to end this entire thought so that we can actually get to it, I wonder like what the breaking point is going to be. Like, like the straw on the camel's back, like that kind of thing. And I've seen people discussing it on Twitter and on comment sections and here, and people telling me it's the futures, it's the this, it's the expiration dates, it's the so and so. Right, I get the concept. I am of understanding. However, when does that end? How long until prices actually reflect what's going on? How long until we actually see some sort of reality in these markets? Because, and I've said before online, I can see people kind of beginning to crack. I see people on Twitter, on forums, like discussing things around crypto. I see it in their videos. And you can tell that everyone's like waiting, but also like kind of tired of waiting for something that we know is going to happen with no actual date. The market should, and I wrote this on Twitter. I'm okay. And I was saying basically like alt season has to happen. Altcoin season usually takes place around like January and February. This is when we begin to see like the beginnings of the running up in price. By the time we get to summer, we go up and kind of like shift sideways a bit. It's like a consolidation period. And then by the time we end up getting to like when it gets cold in the northern hemisphere, this is when you probably first heard about crypto and when you rushed into it many years ago because you saw that prices had exponentially increased. So with all this attention being paid to our market, with all of this accumulation, if you missed the news, this was maybe 2 or 3 days ago, we heard that a company announced openly that they're trying to, or are going to, they're creating their own Ethereum reserve. And they're starting out with, $500 million to $1 billion worth of Ether for their reserve, like starting out. It did almost nothing to Ether's price. And all the other altcoins are tied to Ethereum. So this is by far the weirdest cycle that we've ever had. And I could have never imagined 30xing, a proper 30x, the amount of interest that we had 2 years ago. And the prices look crazy. On top of all of this, as I stated just a couple seconds ago, people are talking about the US dollar's imminent collapse and how this is going to influence Bitcoin. Tim Draper is in the news. It says Tim Draper said the US dollar is going extinct. Bitcoin is set to dominate retail. This conversation is popping up again. You might have remembered a month ago I told you a lot of the news every other day that we were getting revolved around something with Bitcoin and gold and gold and Bitcoin and Bitcoin and gold. It was Bitcoin's going to take over gold. Gold's price is falling. Bitcoin's going to rise. Bitcoin's going to become digital. It's like this kind of loop that we kept on hearing. The shift, and I mean if you can even call it that, now is revolving around like, if it will become digital gold, how will people use it? There's some kind of a fear. I don't know. amongst maximalists and other people within the space as to like what Bitcoin can do next. Lightly touching the surface of like Bitcoin staking. People are discussing more and more like that Bitcoin will be used in place of the US dollar, and like people will use it as an everyday currency. And I don't know where explicitly this is coming from. There must be investors behind the scenes who are like, all right, it has to do something else. Just because we had a lot of attention paid to the Lightning Network in 2017, 2018. If people had continued paying attention to it and building it up, we could be using Lightning everywhere. But that's not the case, and this is what I think is coming back into the actual discussion. So Tim Draper said the US dollar is going extinct, and Bitcoin is set to dominate retail. Tim Draper is warning of the US dollar's impending collapse. Okay. As Bitcoin accelerates towards total transactional dominance. Okay. Venture capitalist Tim Draper issued a stark warning about the future of fiat currency at the end of May on Twitter, weighing in on a growing debate within the Bitcoin community. I feel like a lot of the larger players within the space say something and then everyone else discusses it, and then people make articles talking about that this is now a growing debate. No, this has been something since around 2013, 2014, because I've looked back into the past and other articles of Bitcoin. This has been a constant discussion. When some of the earliest investors got in, they were like poking it with a stick. Okay, what else does it do? Like, what's the other thing? So people were like, okay, you can use it as a payment. And they were like, right, 3 transactions per second. And that's where we get that number from Visa. Visa and MasterCard, for those of you who don't know, do 60,000 transactions per second. And that's because they have centralized services. So one of the biggest obstacles for crypto has constantly been with a decentralized platform, and everything is not going through just one funnel. It's going to tens of thousands of them. How do you create a system that is secure, that is decentralized, and that's also fast? Thus, the Lightning Network came to be, and the people screamed that the Lightning Network was more centralized, even though it is decentralized, and there's no real way around it. So it hasn't been a growing debate. It's just more of a, I think that the larger, richest people within the space have so much Bitcoin that they're now looking for like another thing to get more investors into it. And they're constantly saying like, well, we have to do this. And it's like what I said before for Ether and for Cardano and XR, and it doesn't matter. Just do it. There doesn't need to be a gigantic debate. We don't need Tim Draper or Max Kaiser or Mahlers or Beyonce to stand on stage and talk about that Bitcoin needs A, B, and C. Just do it. You people can raise 100 million, 750 million, 3.3 billion US dollars to buy more Bitcoin, but I don't see any news, any news about $15 million being used to build the Lightning Network further. I don't hear any news about companies or institutions, because the way that the Lightning Network works is that you have to lock, essentially like you're staking your Bitcoin. That's like, that would be the current way of explaining what it is. You kind of stake your Bitcoin, you lock it into the network, into the Lightning Network, and basically whatever amount you put in, you create like a mini highway. It's kind of weird. So let's say you lock up 0.1 Bitcoin into the Lightning Network. Every transaction less than 0.10 Bitcoin can pass through your lane. So you would essentially create 10 different lanes, 0.01 each, and everyone doing transactions less than that would pay, I think, 1 or 2 Satoshis to be able to use your highway. The idea being that in the future, each Satoshi would be on par with the US dollar, and therefore you're investing early. And also, basically, it's a very cheap, cost-effective way to send rapid, instantaneous payments around the world through the Bitcoin network, with the finalization of the transactions happening also on the layer 1 Bitcoin chain. we've gotten tons of news about all these companies spending billions. And then they all come out to say something like, well, like we have to make sure that, cool, Bitcoin is a payment option and it can be a quicker one with Lightning. Why haven't all of these people joined forces, each put in $10 million because they can afford it? We would have over 150 million easy plus that could have built up the Lightning Network so that we could already have Bitcoin as like a proper payment thing, as opposed to having to use an app from Square or Squat or whatever all these things are calling themselves these days. Draper, known for his long-standing support of crypto, said the US dollar is rapidly losing value and predicted a major shift in retail behavior. I don't think so. I think Bitcoin isn't going to be used daily by everyone. Listen, we've gone over this before. This was a conversation in 2019. I said back then, I don't think that the average person is not going to use their Bitcoin as a means of payment until its price is over $1 million per coin. I don't think anyone wants to be the pizza guy, and I don't think anyone wants to let go early. So therefore, if Bitcoin's at 100K, I think people would feel far more easy if they were spending 0.00001234 Satoshis as opposed to a tenth of a Bitcoin for something that they were actually trying to buy. I don't think there's a current shift. I think it's that in the future there will be a shift. His comment followed a post from Swan Bitcoin discussing the renewed divide between Bitcoin as a store of value and a medium of exchange. It doesn't have to be one thing. This is part of the problem with everyone in crypto. Years ago, everything is always there. It's either a 1 or a 0. You either like Bitcoin or you like XRP. You can't like or have both. You can either support Cardano, but you can't like Solana, and you can't like this, and you can't like Bitcoin. It's always so tribal and like in just one corner. We know for a fact, just through generalized logic, there doesn't need to be a debate or a divide. Bitcoin can be a store of value, and it can also be used as a medium of exchange. Period. Like there's nothing else that really has to be there. But so many of these, if you've ever looked at any of these like conferences, a lot of people will stand on stage and they'll declare that like Bitcoin's main purpose is like a store of value. It doesn't have to be used. No one should be using it. We should all just be essentially I'm not joking, accumulating it and holding on to it. Not even using it as a currency, which is its intended purpose. And then the idea of actually using Bitcoin as something other than digital gold, a lot of people go, where is it? And Draper said, and I quote, "The dollar is going extinct. People will rush to spend it as it loses value. Retailers will soon prefer Bitcoin. And when they do, that's when people will start spending Bitcoin." I also don't believe that either. Right. Apparently there was also something recently from Jack Dorsey questioning the long-term relevance of Bitcoin if it's simply limited to a store of value. I don't know what these people want from us, especially when they have all the money to be able to like really change the system how they think it should be fit. But as you might have imagined, this was popular news. It was Tim Draper. It was talking about the collapse of the US dollar. A lot of analysts do believe that the US dollar is kind of like on its way out, but we probably have another 20 years with it. The idea of like the collapse of it or like imminent today is a bit intense. The idea revolves around the US dollar is losing power, and we will see other currencies rise up next to it and potentially against it. But in some capacity, we will always, like the US dollar has lost 99% of its value since 1971. We still have it. The idea of the US dollar like disappearing is non-existent. What's going to happen is that over the course of the next 20 years, it will probably lose an additional 99.9% of its value. And it'll be so low in value that people will simply choose to use something else. And this is where I think we're getting a lot of this current accumulation happening, which also doesn't make any sense because we keep seeing all this movement and all this payment and all this accumulation, and then the prices don't move. It's very, 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 very odd. That's the Tim Draper news. I can show you 16 other articles from other analysts and people within the cryptocurrency space saying the exact same thing. They all have this belief that Bitcoin exclusively is going to be the thing that people choose to do transactions with, to use as a store of value, to buy things with. It's imminent, but it's also like we're there, but we're not quite there. Because I think the other thing that really, logically, if we can be honest with ourselves, the things that will get Bitcoin going is the price rising. Retail doesn't have interest in something that stays flat. Retail seemingly loves this FOMO idea. They get in as prices are rising, and this is how they accumulate and also get into the market as well. I'm still counting on $1 million Bitcoin being the point when people actually start using it. Before that, I really don't think. Even this narrative of all these institutions that Bitcoin has to pass by $800,000 a coin to be able to surpass gold, the average person doesn't care. The average person who's not an investor is not thinking about gold. They're not thinking about silver. They're not thinking about equities. They're not thinking about deficits. They're not thinking about commodities. They're thinking about in terms of the numbers that they know. So Bitcoin going to $829,416 means jack diddly squat to them. They want to see something that says $1 million because then they essentially realize that they could have become a millionaire. They begin to FOMO into it. Bitcoin goes higher. I think we have some time, but I also think we should definitely be around there at this point because, right. That's the Tim Draper US dollar going extinct news. And yeah, let's move on. Also in weird news, this is also happening, and when will the straw work? How many pieces of straw do we need in order for something to actually give way? Years ago, we had a lot of billionaires who talked negatively about Bitcoin and said it was garbage and nobody should be using it. That was then followed by a number of billionaires who were like, JK, I've loved Bitcoin all along. And then a brand new siege of billionaires got into the space to talk about how amazing and awesome and fantabulous Bitcoin was. A number of them began to announce that they were putting 1%, 0.5%, or 5%. That was the big one of their portfolios into Bitcoin. It's very similar. Remember the video from, this was 2 or 3 years ago. I want to say 2022. 2023? Doesn't matter. There was a thing that we got from BlackRock. It was a leaked thing where they were telling some of their largest clients that they should be putting 50, 60, 70, or 80% of their portfolio into Bitcoin. And that was when Bitcoin went from 16,000 to 100,000. So now we're, I guess, seeing the secondary effect of a lot of that potentially. Someone by the name of Ricardo Salinas Pliego, one of Mexico's wealthiest individuals, has apparently expressed interest in a significant shift towards cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin. This man, if I remember correctly, 3, 4, or 5 years ago, I don't have the exact time frame, announced that he liked Bitcoin and was considering putting some money into it. I think we then had another article where he said that because of his earlier interest in Bitcoin and Bitcoin's price rising, that a huge, significant portion of his portfolio was now just in Bitcoin. In a recent statement, Salinas, who ranks as the Mexico's third richest person, indicated that apparently he is contemplating the conversion of his entire investment portfolio into Bitcoin. When I tell you that I'm annoyed with prices, that I'm tired of reading stuff like this, that I really don't understand how much longer we can go on being beneath a $500,000 Bitcoin, it's things like this. Everything added up, everything accumulated. This is crazy. We can't keep getting news. And I mean, even if this man didn't state he's contemplating the idea of putting everything he owns into Bitcoin, all these other millionaires and billionaires are buying up huge amounts of coins. The 15, 16, 17 companies who keep announcing that they're going to be buying Bitcoin and buying more Bitcoin. And then we hear about them subsequently a day or two later because they just bought more Bitcoin. Then a day and a half later, they also bought more Bitcoin. They're issuing $3 billion against their company to just buy more Bitcoin. It doesn't, none of this is making sense to me. None of it. From the literal perspective of supply and demand, you can see a company announce on the news that they're buying $20 million worth of some company's stock, a stock that has 3 billion shares issued. They say they're buying 20 million, that stock goes up by 14%. If 95% of all the Bitcoin is held by whales inside of wallets, and all the rest that there is sitting on crypto exchanges, not liquid, and some of it is in OTC markets, and we keep hearing daily, this company bought 140, this company bought 7,000, this company bought $1.2 billion. Like, actually explain to me why none of this is moving. Because listen, because I remember in February and March us going through the exact same thing. Like, why are prices, tariff, cool, got it, awesome, amazing, but also logic. And then everyone was like, well, in 6 weeks and 4 weeks, in 2 weeks, and then this is going to happen, and then the golden cross, and then the apple banana, and then the Bart Simpson. And I'm like, okay, now show me this actually happening. How much longer are these people going to be able to accumulate freely without prices moving? Do you remember the news that week? What country was it? I want to say Saudi Arabia, but that feels incorrect. Somewhere in the Middle East, we got news. This was 2 weeks ago. I think one of the governments apparently purchased, I think $500 million worth of Bitcoin, like just as a just in case, just to have. And I was like, in no other asset class does that happen. Can you imagine a state, a province, a town? Give me a state. Some company announces we just bought $500 million worth of homes. Another one says we just bought $3.3 billion worth of homes. Another company says we just bought the equivalent of 1,400 homes. I just saw a video of this guy on Instagram. He was talking about the actual accumulation of real estate by BlackRock, Blackstone, and I forgot the other third one within the UK. And he was showing a chart over the course of the last 10 years for home prices in the UK and how they had risen exponentially. The point of his chart was showing that this was over 10 years. This was like slow accumulation by big banks and companies and institutions. And he was showing that I think Blackstone just announced that they were going to be accumulating, I think 14,000. I think the number was 14,000 homes within the UK. And then he showed BlackRock's statement. They're going to be accumulating, I think, 140,000 just within the United Kingdom. And he was showing the chart and he was like, this is what the prices are going to be. And those charts were showing by the end of this decade. They're accelerating because for those of you who missed it, corporate landlords or landlords, they want as much property as possible. They want all of it. If you own all the property, it's dystopian, but renters then have nowhere to go. You must rent from me, and they can therefore then also choose what the actual prices of said rental property would be. His chart showed, an exponential growth rate in the actual prices of being able to purchase a home within the United Kingdom just because of the efforts of those two companies pricing tons of people out. Imagine the other 15 other companies who are going to be doing the exact same thing, who may not have as much capital, but they'll be buying 6,000 homes and apartments each. When I think of stuff like that, it makes perfect sense to me. Of course, prices are going to go higher. Of course, the cost of land is going to go higher. Of course, it's going to get more difficult for people to be able to buy a home if you're accumulating 140,000 of something that is relatively finite. For those of you who also don't know, and I'll give it to you this way because I know there's always somebody who says, well, no, we have a lot more land. They could just build more homes. No, you're forgetting history. At the end of 1944 to 1945, a lot of these places were not looking too hot. So there are a lot of laws in place that say a lot of these things are protected forests because they were destroyed before. We actually need these trees to get air. And this is why a lot of countries you'll see they have a very specific amount of land that they can build on, or they try to reclaim farming land, or they tear down other buildings. It's literally because they need it. They need the actual forest and the other stuff for their actual region. There's always one person who's like, no, we have tons of land, and it's like, no, you really don't. So when you talk about the amount of land that is able to be built on, or you might have noticed in your city, your local town, province, in New York, California, it doesn't matter where you are, you're seeing a lot more high rises, is because people are building up because essentially they can't build sideways. They can't build a lot more things, or a lot of smaller towns are being bought out or reclaimed, air quotes, to build new cities. It's because there are very specific parameters that countries have because they don't want a repeat after 1945 of not having enough literal green land. Bringing it on back, this is what I mean when I talk about all of this. And I know you can hear the frustration and the annoyance in my voice. It's because it doesn't make any sense. I've been here long enough that people used to say, if there was somebody rich, not even a billionaire, somebody rich on TV who announced that they knew what crypto was and they liked it, we would see prices rise. In 2020, if we heard that anyone was looking towards Bitcoin to use it, to buy it, the idea of an ETF, do you remember every time we got news that it was the day of the decision of the SEC as to if we were going to get a yes or a no for the ETFs, the price would rise on that day, expecting a potential. It would rise by 5 or 6%. That was expecting that Gary Gensler might change his mind and say yes. How is all this Bitcoin being accumulated? Daily. 10,000 being gone. We had news before that just the ETFs alone still are accumulating daily 300% more Bitcoin than is being mined per day. The coins that get mined, 100% of them aren't sold. The people who are mining it mine it for themselves. And they're still buying the 9 companies in the US, 300% alone of the daily mined Bitcoin is being accumulated by them. Microstrategy is purchasing so much Bitcoin, they've made Bitcoin further deflationary by 2.3% Microstrategy alone. Corporations, so not the ETFs, not MicroStrategy, corporations are buying anywhere from 300 to 500% of the daily Bitcoin mined supply. My friend, what does that tell you? Something's very off. Something's extremely off. If corporations are buying 300 to 500%, MicroStrategy is making Bitcoin further deflationary, and then the 9 ETF companies are also accumulating 300 to 500%. You know, we're also missing the family offices, the sovereign wealth funds. We're missing you, your friends, and your family, and any other retail investors who are also buying every single day, who have reoccurring buys through a crypto exchange. What's going on? What's happening? What exactly are we all missing that we are not privy to, that we are not? It's like something really weird is happening. This man is talking about moving his entire portfolio into Bitcoin. I'm really at a loss for words. I've been trying to make sense of it for a number of months now. I know that the tariffs can be used as an excuse, but there's no real excuse. I wonder what's actually happening. If we were supposed to be over $100,000 in 2021, for those of you who missed that, we didn't go higher because of the situation of the world and fear in markets. That was 2021, friend. 4 years later, we have, 20 ETFs for Bitcoin around the world? How much institutional adoption for Ethereum, for XRP? How many people are buying? How many institutions and companies and corporations? We didn't, in 2021, we didn't have 18 companies announcing that they're creating a Bitcoin reserve. In 2021, we didn't have the United States of America announcing a Bitcoin reserve. In 2021, we didn't have the other multiple countries. We just recently heard from Ethiopia and Pakistan, who are like openly mining like over $1 billion, I think, worth of Bitcoin per year, or something along those lines. And those are the ones who are admitting it out loud, who are also accumulating Bitcoin for their own reserves. We didn't have any of that 4 years ago. What's going on? That all of that doesn't merit just $30,000 extra in price. Yeah, that's going to do it for this video. I'm very, very confused. I am completely confused. Hope you all have a great day. Hope you all have a good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever you might be. I do hope it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting. And I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.